We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost.
Welcome to Rabble Rants. I'm Santiago Hello Quintero, and alongside Jesse McLean, we're going to unpack the stories that have us most riled up and challenge the narratives around them.
I was going to ask Santiago about his experience with the Toronto flood, but I just found out he napped through it, so I'll fill him in on what happened. No, seriously though, if you haven't been paying attention, Toronto and the surrounding area, pretty much the neighborhoods north of Lake Ontario, so Mississauga and Oakville also, they experienced a lot of rain. The highest rainfall since 2013. It's like the fifth most on record. At Pearson Airport, which is like the west end of the city, it's not even in the city technically, they got 26 millimeters of rain in 10 minutes. So when this happens in the city, the Don Valley River floods. I mean, amongst other areas that there were issues there was reports of a bit of a surge from the lake as well. But in general, the main problem is, the Don River. I tweeted out yesterday, somewhat facetiously, that this is what hefty police budgets look like. And the usual comments were there to remind me that, this is climate mitigation. Essentially, that's what I meant. I didn't blame it on police, but a lot of this has to do with the fact that we don't prioritize our environment over many things, police just being one of them. I mean, this whole problem started with the development around the Don River, back in the 1800s. There's a great article by The Hoser that I'm going to link in the show notes. They did all the work for us here. Back in 2022, when the project to stop it from flooding on the East Banks was first initiated. But they talk about back in the 1800s, it wasn't Ashbridge's Bay, it was Ashbridge's Marsh, and it just became a cesspool. That's where the industrial part of the city was, and everything was gathering in the water there, and so... You know what they did? They filled it in. They filled in the marshland. And so that, amongst other really bad development choices that were to mostly facilitate like transportation and industry and to build around the portlands, they basically have a river that doesn't flow out to the lake properly. It can't flow out when there's lots of rainfall. It gets clogged up in a lot of places because the path of it has been manipulated over time. And so we got a lot of rain. And, so folks have seen the images at Union Station, it flowing down the stairs there. Santiago, how does that happen that we know what all the flood risks are at the moment and they just spent, I don't know how much money rebuilding Union Station and still in one of these, like what they call regulatory rainfalls? Like, that's not the first time we've seen that on the stairs there.
No, that renovation felt eternal at Union Station. They took so long to do it, and yet, I guess, flood proofing wasn't a part of it. I don't know. And it wasn't just Union Station. Like, across the city, there was so much flooding. And it's, like, there's consistently areas that get pretty bad. The bridges where the trains pass over in Toronto, underneath those, it's typically very bad. Like, I'm thinking the one, the Liberty Village one on King Street, Queen and Dufferin, they typically they get flooded enough when this happens, enough to fully submerge vehicles. And so I guess they haven't improved the drainage in that area to avoid that. So, lock people into the neighborhoods. Why not?
Yeah, there's like a lot of like spending choices that could have played into this. I mean, like the Ford government promised like 2 years ago $25 million for the province to deal with drainage, like the storm sewers and whatnot. That's just like a drop in the bucket to what they needed. And he also, in 2018, completely axed any of the targets set for flood protection by the Liberals, which were probably measly to begin with, and then he just got rid of them and never did put in writing anything to protect our wetlands, because that is one of the big contributors to flooding, is the failure to protect green spaces, but very specifically, mostly wetlands. And this is something the Ford government continues to do, like that Bradford bypass that they talk about. A good chunk of that is going through what should be protected wetlands. And they've even manipulated the environmental assessment process around that because it is a sensitive area that shouldn't be developed on. And when they opened up the Greenbelt originally, that included a lot of wetland, and that's what a lot of people utilized in their argument to push back against this development. And the only response that he had then was, we won't build houses on the floodplains. Like, it didn't say anything about protecting the wetlands, but he wouldn't at least put people's homes at risk by allowing them to build on specific floodplains, which we know are just going to change over time, especially if we fail to protect the wetlands around them, right? And we continuing to get this worsening weather from climate change. And so obviously in the provincial budget, there ain't shit for that either. He's only promised to look at it, to like have a climate change provincial assessment done. There is no plan from the Ontario government at all to stop these floods in any shape or form. That article by the Hoser talks about the city of Toronto, though. They did spend $1 billion trying to, in this most recent Don River project that isn't quite complete. I mean, it should have, I think, been finished by now. Back in January, they were like on their last steps, and there's really not been much reporting on what stage it's at that now, but it wasn't working yesterday. So it's not complete, and I don't think it's one of those things where for sure that it's going to solve the problem. Like, a lot of it is going to be assessment, engineering, but some of it is going to be speculation. The Hoser also points out, and I'm not sure if it has anything to do with it, but they make the special note that normally an engineering firm would do this. However, it was awarded to another U.S. firm that had a slightly different approach. So I think folks will be looking to this project and its completion, but I mean, that's just like a sliver of the problem, because the Humber, it overflowed too. Like I said, Oakville and Mississauga, you saw people who had parked their cars for work and then they were underwater. Toronto didn't even get the worst of the rain that came yesterday. That was Burlington, and other people got the real brunt of it. So I imagine there is flooding right across the province. And yeah, this is just one of those impacts of climate change that I think people didn't realize we would feel, right? Kind of like the smoke was. Like, we're not impacted by forest fires. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, this is all just becoming more and more common, and it's the consequences too, on an urban level, of just a failure to design your cities in a way that's interconnected with nature, right? And I just remembered something, so I'm gonna veer a little bit for a second, because I had found out a couple weeks ago about a really cool project from my home country in Colombia, in the city of Medellin, where they created these green corridors throughout the city and planted 65 hectares, don't know how to pronounce that word, of greenery all over the city, right? And it led to the average temperature in the city dropping by 2 degrees Celsius by doing so, right? So, and the project, I think
That's incredible.
Yeah, right? And it only cost, I mean, I don't know how much it would cost in Canada to do that, but for them it cost $16.3 million, which is...
Whenever you look at these projects, though, you always find out that it costs more to do nothing.
Yeah. No, but I mean, $16 million on a city budget level is a drop in the bucket, That's nothing.
And it's really not anything that a municipality should have to take on its own, right? This is a role that the federal and the provincial government should play for sure. Like, they are responsible to a degree for infrastructure. And, the airports weren't functioning, the power is going out, Toronto's an economic center, people's lives have to continue. Like, they do have a responsibility here in terms of funding, but it's just never going to be, well, not never, but it's just hasn't seemed to prioritize itself. Despite every single year, it's so tangible how we're feeling this impact more and more, right? Through weather. And it is going to be extremely costly. And like they shored up the west bank of the Don River quite a few years ago because activists took it upon themselves to pressure city council a lot for many years to finally get something done. And they spent a lot of money doing that. But still, one of their main priorities was to maintain the ability to develop on lands directly beside it. And so they raised the grade everywhere that they needed to so you could still build. Like, that was part of their main priority. And it's kind of skewed that we haven't learned to, like, it's just such a colonialist approach. Right? Make sure we could still build a building there. Like, make sure, right? That is like first and foremost. Forget about the water and its unpredictability and anticipating future problems. It's just maintain the ability to develop.
We're just not spending money smartly in this city, And this is not a uniquely Toronto issue either. This is something you see across Canada. And we're going to be dealing with more and more flooding every year. You feel disconnected from things, but those big hurricanes that are happening more and more in the Caribbean, well, they loop right up and send weather systems our way too. And with those becoming more common, you're going to have more instances of significant weather events. And I mean, at least I'll take rain over fire, that's for sure. But we need to start planning, like, okay, and this is what we mean when we talk about like how not doing anything about climate change is more expensive, right? There's a certain amount of climate change that is now locked in, right? We've crossed certain thresholds that we should not have crossed, and there are going to be consequences to that, and cities are going to have to, cities, countries, provinces, everything, they're going to have to respond to those fucking consequences that they created, and they're going to have to adapt things, and they're going to have to spend a lot of money to adapt. And this is why you should have done something already. But now it's too late for some of that. So don't make it worse and go spend the money and adapt.
What you say reminds me of one of the points that I read that was kind of shocking. And this was back in 2022 when it was last reported on by the Ontario government, that Ontario's what we call urban green space has declined by 94%. Like, you won't get that back because that means they've developed over that green space. And you won't have any mayor that is going to tear down existing development, particularly in what their crafted housing crisis, and build green space. Like, they're not going to tear up the parking lot and build paradise. Not in this political climate. And so that's another threshold that's gone. So by 94% over 20 years, in 20 years, that green space was gone. And that plays a huge role in allowing water to drain naturally, right? You can only imagine if rain falls on pavement versus like grass space. And I don't mean lawns because they're awful for water absorption. Absolutely awful. But like, I mean, as it was intended to be.
Yeah. And like cities like Medellin, they've, to counter that, they've been designing their roadways in a way to be very absorbent, right? They use more absorbent concrete that helps with drainage right? We're not doing that. And, a lot of people in Toronto have been complaining about how hot this summer is, right? Well, it's been proven time and time again that having, those green canopies in your city help cool down streets more effectively than anything else. Concrete absorbs heat.
And then
right?
radiates it back to you, though,
Yeah.
right? Like you feel it coming from your feet and
Like-
on top of you from the sun.
The way that we design cities just heats them up so much more. So when you're thinking about climate change, like think about how much hotter it is in a city. Who the hell is it? Like, we know who's in charge. But like, fucking idiots, Like this is so like you expect this to be like what it means to be in city government is go and design beautiful cities that function, but like what we see is just developers see opportunities to make money from the extremely expensive housing in Toronto, so they'll try and pack another building and pack more development into every square inch, and instead of making it sustainable and functional. No.
Maybe these will lower the property values enough for some of us to move back into the city. We'd have to obviously live in like stilted houses or, just accept the fact that we're in a floodplain. But shit, even the bridle path flooded. And so I won't lie, I was giddy when I saw Drake's video of his mansion and almost his closet being flooded with pea-colored water.
He's having a bad year, isn't he?
Yeah. Insert Kendrick track here. No. But yeah, but apart from being fodder for me, it's a reminder that like these fucks that make the rules, and Drake doesn't make the rules, but I mean the wealthy, their homes are flooded too, but they have insurance to replace all of this and, money to replace all of this and to escape the inconvenience for a moment or to not go into work. Like you saw some people having to navigate waves in the street to try to get to work. So what, they got to work just fully wet from head to toe and were then expected to work a day's work? Because I'm sure there were bosses out there that weren't going to put up with anything less. And so although they feel the impact of climate change along with us, like there's no denying it, they have so many ways to like not feel the impact in the same way, And as long as they can still do that comfortably, the urgency won't be there. Like you think you're worried, or he's just going to be like, maybe the bridle path ain't for me,
I am curious to see, now this is, full tinfoil hat disclaimer, I have no evidence. But I'm curious to see who had their power restored first.
Yeah, like 170,000 almost were out at its peak, but then at like 55,000 people had it out for a while.
Yeah. I got mine back pretty quickly. Once the power went out, I was like, well, I'm gonna go to sleep.
Now that you mention it, during the big blackout, my mom's bougie condo got the power back on way before my little complex. Yeah, I never even thought of that.
Yeah,
They find a way to screw us every time.
You wonder, right? You wonder, but I just straight up went to sleep and waited out the power because without AC, oh God. It's one of those things where you're reminded how fragile everything is. You take down AC when it's super hot outside and everything's miserable.
Just before we sign off this rant, I did give credit for them spending $1 billion on this Don River project, but it took many, many, many years to even initiate, and then it's still not complete. And just to put that in perspective, the same city spends $2.3 billion on police. So although we started with my tweet admittedly being a little bit of rage bait, and I'll take any opportunity to argue that we need to defund the police, it is like a drop in the bucket considering what its impact is going to be over time. So, yeah. Priorities, people. Priorities. that is a wrap on another episode of Blueprints of Disruption. Thank you for joining us. Also, a very big thank you to the producer of our show, Santiago Halu Quintero. Blueprints of Disruption is an independent production operated cooperatively. You can follow us on Twitter at BP of Disruption. If you'd like to help us continue disrupting the status quo, please share our content, and if you have the means, consider becoming a patron. Not only does our support come from the progressive community, so does our content. So reach out to us and let us know what or who we should be amplifying. So until next time, keep disrupting.